The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Mark. Jesus and his disciples set out for the villages of Caesarea Philippi. Along the way, he asked his disciples, "Who do people say that I am?" They said in reply, "John the Baptist, others Elijah, still others one of the prophets." And he asked them, "But who do you say that I am?" Peter said to him in reply, "You are the Christ." Then he warned them not to tell anyone about him. He began to teach them that the Son of Man must suffer greatly and be rejected by the elders, the chief priests, and the scribes, and be killed, and rise after 3 days. He spoke this openly. Then Peter took him aside and began to rebuke him. At this he turned around and, looking at the disciples, rebuked Peter and said, "Get behind me, Satan. You are not thinking as God does, but as human beings do." He summoned the crowd with his disciples and said to them, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and that of the gospel will save it." The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus.
I went to Newman this past Friday to watch their high school homecoming pep rally. And that was full of a bunch of different zany activities and screams and shouts from the cheerleaders and all sorts of different fun games. One of them that stands out in my mind was called the three-legged potato sack race. And they got a bunch of siblings to come down in front of the entire student body, which doesn't cause any emotional trauma further down the road. Of course, not at all. But so the three-legged potato sack race was sets of brothers and sisters would put one leg outside and the other leg inside a potato sack. And then the other sibling would put their opposite leg inside the potato sack. And then they had to run across the finish line together, trying to coordinate their steps. And some did exceptionally well, and others did fantastically terrible. They would trip over themselves, all four of their legs were out of sync, and they would end up tripping, getting tangled in the sack. Sometimes it would be inside out, and other times their head would end up in the sack. It was very funny, with no further emotional trauma down the road, of course. So the fact that one sibling group, a brother and sister, stood out to me because it was almost like they practiced. They were like some sort of fantastic galloping fantasy beast. They were galloping across the finish line, communicating, saying, "Okay, left foot, right foot, left foot, right foot." And it was perfectly synced and perfectly balanced. And that's how they won. It was pretty impressive to see. So that was the potato sack race. I think of that because of Jesus' words that have been eating at me all week as I looked at this reading. He says, "Whoever wishes to come after me must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me." And I've been thinking, what in the world does it mean to deny myself? To deny means to disregard or pretend as if it didn't exist. So I decided to deny myself from here on out. What I'm going to do is I'm going to skip lunch today, and I'm going to go home and pray for 3 hours, and then after that I'm going to go and serve all the poor that I can find, and feed the hungry, and I'll visit the homebound and the sick, and then I'll give all my money away, and then I'll stay up late praying till about 1:30 a.m., then I'll wake up early, and I'll fast again and skip breakfast. And then I won't talk to any of my friends, because that's a pleasure and I don't want to do that. No. You'd run out. You'd run out of steam. You'd break down emotionally, mentally, physically. So to deny yourself, I think, requires balance and a sort of virtue. Because if I'm going to deny myself all these earthly pleasures, that's just saying no to God's gifts, because life is pretty good. Mother Teresa, yes, she probably did a similar schedule to that, but that's because she worked up to it. You don't see a bodybuilder starting off before they reach Arnold Schwarzenegger size, doing the huge weights. They have to work up to it with virtue and practice. So I think that enjoying life, taking time to maybe take a day off. I've only been a priest for 3 months, and I realized that, wow, a day off is really good. It's really nice, and it's very, very important. Or for you to be able to say, you know what, I'm not going to get any yard work done, but I'm going to take my kids to the park, and then we're going to sit down and watch a movie together. Or, you know what, I'm not going to get any emails done today, but I am going to take my grandkids out for ice cream. To be able to say yes to some things and no to others, I think is what Jesus means to deny himself. We all tried to deny ourselves in seminary, deny ourselves and say yes to ourselves in being the holiest and the most serviest and the most pious and the best looking priest in seminary we could be. And yes, it's true, we do need to serve and we do need to give of ourselves, but I think we need to give up of ourselves the need to look perfect and the need to be perfect in front of others, when it's really God's eyes are the only ones that matter. Jesus says, "Get behind me, Satan." Satan is not just on one side of laziness, he's on the other side of overwork. Satan, the name Hasatan from Hebrew, the Old Testament, it means to accuse and to be the adversary and to condemn. If we go too far to one side and we're lazy and we don't do any good works, then Satan is there to accuse us. If we go too far to the other side and try to be holy and try to do it all and try to control everything, he's there to condemn us. So that's why we need Christ in that three-legged potato sack race. He says, "Follow me." And I don't want him way ahead of me, or I don't want to try to outrun him, because that's not going to work either. I want to be right beside him, step by step, walking perfectly balanced in his footsteps. And the only way that we can do that is through communication and fuel. Those students needed to communicate to get across the finish line, and they also needed fuel and energy to do that. For us, it's our communication with Christ daily, whatever we're going through, to be able to communicate with him and stay in perfect balance and step with him. The second thing is fuel. We need food to do that. And that's why we go to the altar every single week in the Eucharist. We'll receive the body and blood of the man that we're walking with, trying to stay in step with. And so as we go into this 24th week of ordinary time, let's take this communication and this food with us throughout the week so that we can stay in balance and finally cross that finish line into holiness and into heaven. Amen.